We're joined now with the former Federal Reserve Vice Chairman Alan Binder. He is a professor of economics at Princeton University. Of course, David Kelly with us as well from JPMorgan. And guys, or gentlemen, just before we get into the discussion about the economy and the obstacles, Austin Goolsbee just said to us a few minutes ago that he himself even thinks that the debt ceiling here in the U.S. is a, quote, weird construct. What did you make of that?
Well, I think I think it is a weird construct. But what it is it's a distraction. There are really important decisions we have to make as a people in a democracy. We have to talk about the age at which people receive Social Security. We have to talk about things like oil prices and and tax rates overall. We have to think about defense. And these are the big questions. And we miss out on talking about these big questions because we worry about, you know, the debt ceiling. It is artificial. Right.
We get distracted by that. And Alan, reading from your op-ed yesterday, I would think that you would agree, right?
I agree entirely. Look, if Congress passes a budget that says the deficit this year will be $743 billion, plus or minus, because they're estimating errors, that's how much the national debt has to go up that year. So the budget should be interpreted as a kind of, but a soft version of a national debt ceiling year by year. It makes no sense whatsoever to put some absolute ceiling on there, which the Congress is not going to abide by, and that invites that you might crash into the budget ceiling. What usually happens instead is this political theater, and we don't crash into it.
But you said, Alan, in your op-ed, I'm reading it here, that hitting the debt limit would force a 43% cut in government spending, and that's why it's on your list of risks to the economy. Right.
Now remember, I put about a 5% probability on that, so the odds are 20 to 1, 19 to 1 that we don't do that. But if we did it, that's what it means, right? You've hit a ceiling. The Secretary of the Treasury is then instructed not to float any more debt, but the budget is way out of balance. So you have to bring the two sides together, and you can't raise taxes in a minute. You have to cut spending.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a scary scenario, however, highly unlikely, according to Alan. But Alan, let me get to some of the other scenarios that you outlined in your op-ed, also with a small chance, but still there. The Japanese disaster, you say, is the smallest of the risks that we face?
Yeah, I think so. It's a bigger risk to Japan, of course. It's doing a lot of damage in Japan, and it is reverberating around the world, including the interruption of supply chains. And I read in the paper there are certain types of Japanese automobiles and components that you can't get now. That's not going to help. But the main point there is, the main conceptual point there is, the U.S. is now and has been for quite a few years now constrained by demand. We don't have enough buyers. It's not that we can't supply goods. So this will interrupt to some extent the ability for some American companies to supply goods. And by the way, when Toyota operates in America, it's an American company. So it will do that kind of damage. But I don't think it's much of a threat to abort the recovery.
David?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. What I worry about more than anything else is oil and its potential to affect confidence and incomes in the United States.
Yeah, and actually that, Alan, I think is on the top of your list, right? An oil shock.
Yes. Yes, I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen in the Middle East. You can tick off the list of countries where we don't know what's going to happen in Yemen. We don't know what's going to happen in Libya. We don't know what's going to happen even in Egypt. And that just creates a sort of pervasive uncertainty, and that means there is a scenario where something goes wrong. I didn't even mention Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And the price of oil goes soaring. So, and it's really hard to handicap that.
Right. And 150 is where you see the shock, right, Alan?
I was using that as an example because that's the highest we've been.
Okay.
I think that peaked in '88 at about 147 or 148, right around 150.
Right.
But Alan, given these risks, I mean, some of these things we can actually help protect ourselves from in the long run. Do you think that we should have higher carbon taxes and higher gasoline taxes to try and get us to wean ourselves off this oil addiction?
I absolutely do. As a person who has never run for office and never intends to run for office, I recommend that constantly. No one's ever going to vote against me.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. Yeah. It's one of these. It's one of the few free lunches out there that if you raise gas taxes, you can actually bring down global oil prices, and it doesn't cost the consumer as much as the tax.
Okay.
No, I agree completely, and it's more than that because you will spur all kinds of industrial development in the United States to save on fuel.
Alan, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Alan Blinder from Princeton, the former Fed Vice Chairman.